In recent years, Thanet in Kent has had more than its fair share of political drama. The latest episode involves the decaying Ramsgate port, Brexit, and now a U-turn. Today the government revoked its multi-million-pound contract with Seaborne Freight. This port and the deal with Seaborne Freight was supposed to be a part of the plan to relieve the pressure of a potential no deal Brexit. But instead it's become a massive weight for the government, who just last month were defending their decision to issue a ferry contract to a company with no ferries.
I want this service to run. This isn't something that's been plucked from thin air.
But how much due diligence do you actually do when they're not even big enough to file accounts at Companies House?
Well, we've been through their plans. We've been through the way they're going to deliver operationally. We've looked at...
They've got to get some ships first, haven't they?
Well, all of this, they have it in the pipeline.
That's what the Transport Secretary, Chris Grayling, told Channel 4 News on the 2nd of January. Today, the Department of Transport said this.
Following the decision of Seaborne Freight's backer, Arklow Shipping, to step back from the deal, it became clear Seaborne would not reach its contractual requirements with the government. We have therefore decided to terminate our agreement.
There remain questions over the government's initial due diligence, but local MP Craig McKinley places responsibility on the company who pulled out.
Seaborne, I know, has been much derided as a company with no ships and no experience, but it did have an experienced company behind it. I don't know the commercial reasons why Arklow have decided to pull out. There's been speculation about is it sort of pressure from the Irish government, or I don't believe that. But it's a disappointment because we're ready, and I think Thanet District Council has stepped up to the plate.
You know, the government are the grown-up partner in this arrangement. I mean, are you really happy with the government's handling of this situation?
Well, I am. I mean, you think about it. If they'd done nothing, they'd have been criticised. They tried to do something and get some Brexit resilience with Ramsgate coming into use if needed, and they get blamed for that as well. So I think they tried to do the right thing, and it's really out of their hands that Seaborne and their backers have decided not to get involved here. That doesn't mean the end of the story.
The government say they're in talks with a replacement company, but there are other questions on the viability of the entire plan. This port has not run a regular ferry service since 2013 and is in need of development. It's being kept operational by the local council, but they cannot afford to keep it running at current costs without a new backer.
We're going to lose another £7,000 a day to keep the port in a state of readiness for ferries. That's money that could be spent on homeless people, it could be spent on cleaning the streets, picking up rubbish and so forth. And it's not coming out of Chris Grayling's pocket, it's coming out of the pocket of the poor, benighted residents of Ramsgate who have suffered as a result of fantasies, clear and obvious fantasies.
This entire plan was supposed to be ready for Brexit. And even if a new firm is found, it is unlikely a new ferry service with Belgium will be ready here by the end of March.
Well, for more on this, let's go to our business editor, Siobhan Kennedy. Where does this leave Chris Grayling?
Well, Chris, let's face it, when they come to write the Brexit blockbuster, there will undoubtedly be some scenes on Chris Grayling and the saga of Seaborne. And that is because ever since this company's name first materialised, it has been mired in controversy. No ferries, no finance, and seemingly only one dredger. Despite all of that, Chris Grayling, though, has steadfastly stood by this company, even after revelations on this programme about the boss of Seaborne, Ben Sharp, and his former business dealings, all of which seemingly were shuttered, and one of which left his business associates at the time more than £1 million out of pocket. Those are allegations that he denies. But Chris Grayling has faced a real pasting in the Commons about this, and he wouldn't listen, simply wouldn't listening to the deafening cries of all those around him who told him that Seaborne would never get this ferry service up and running for him. As recently as 2 days ago, even when the council in Thanet said they could simply no longer afford to keep the port of Ramsgate up and running, Chris Grayling still insisted 2 days ago that he was in talks with Seaborne. Well, tonight, Chris, he's not in talks with them anymore.
And you've been speaking to some of the people involved?
I've been speaking to the mayor of Seaborne, the mayor rather of Ostend, who was supposed to be at the receiving end of these ferries, the partnership with Seaborne, and he told me that he was astonished to hear the news today. He read it himself on the website. Nobody, he said, not the council, not Seaborne, not the government even bothered to call him. This despite the fact that he'd been over to Kent and had meetings with everybody involved. No one had bothered to call him. I've always spoken also to the DFDS ferry company that also got one of these big no-deal ferry contracts. There's been some rumours that perhaps they would pick up the slack that Seaborne has left behind, but the boss there told me today, we have offered all the capacity we have and there are no plans for that changing. I think come Monday, when Parliament returns, there will be some really serious questions for Chris Grayling. Who is it that he's talking to offer this new service, and how is it that he made such a mess of this contract with Seaborne?
Thanks, Siobhan. Well, we did ask the Transport Secretary, Chris Grayling, for an interview, but he was unavailable. A little earlier, I spoke to Labour Shadow Transport Secretary Andy MacDonald, and I began by asking him, given this was caused by collapsed backers from Ireland, well, not collapsed backers, but those backers pulling out, was the debacle really Mr Grayling's fault?
He told us that he carried out due diligence, and he clearly hasn't carried out due diligence to any satisfactory standard. And that's why the deal has collapsed. We said this at the time, that it wasn't actually doable, and that's proved to be the case. We've said over and over again, there were no ships, no ports, no ability to deliver on this, yet he's persevered despite all the warnings and all the revelations of the weaknesses in the arrangements, and without checking out the credibility of the individuals concerned. And he was warned and warned again. But I'm afraid it does land at his feet, and he's got to go. We can't carry on with a Secretary of State who continually makes these sorts of errors and leaves the country in this embarrassing situation.
But if it wasn't his error, I mean, does it really matter, given it's only 10% of the capacity, no public money has been spent, and this is only for a no-deal scenario anyway, which probably won't happen?
Well, only 10% of our roll-on, roll-off ferry trade is an enormous amount. And if we were to be denied that, that would be absolutely catastrophic for our economy. So I'm afraid that sort of excuse from Chris Grayling will not wash. This is a hugely important issue, and he's messed up yet again, I'm afraid.
How do we learn the lessons, though? I mean, should the government now release the due diligence paperwork so that we can know what it did and what it didn't do?
Well, exactly. They really can't hide behind this falsehood that somehow due diligence was carried out. Well, let's see exactly what inquiries they made.
I mean, competence aside, this is only for the event of a no-deal Brexit. That's not going to happen, is it?
Well, it does matter because that risk has not been taken off the table by Theresa May. She could remove this at a stroke as an issue and say that quite clearly, as a Prime Minister, I'm not going to leave a legacy of a crashed economy simply because I've got to pander to the needs of the extremists in my party. I'm not going to do it.
Andy MacDonald, thank you very much.